Most people think night shifts are boring, quiet, repetitive. But sometimes, the people you meet after midnight aren't supposed to be there at all. I worked the closing shift at a small grocery store in northern Ohio during my second year of college. It wasn't a terrible job. The pay sucked, but the place was quiet after 10 p.m. And most nights I just stocked shelves while listening to podcasts with one earbud in. There were usually only 3 people working late. Me, the cashier up front, and a manager. That Friday night, though, the manager left early because his daughter was sick. So by 11:30 p.m., it was just me and Denise, the cashier. The store closed at midnight. Around 11:40, Denise suddenly came over the intercom. "Ethan, can you check the freezer in the back? I think somebody's in there." At first, I thought she meant a customer accidentally wandered into storage. I grabbed my box cutter from the stocking cart and pushed through the swinging doors into the back room. The storage area was colder than usual. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the industrial freezer door at the far end of the room was cracked open slightly. That immediately felt wrong. Employees were supposed to keep it shut because the alarm would go off if the temperature changed too much. I walked over slowly and pulled the heavy metal handle. The freezer door groaned open. Inside were long metal shelves stacked with frozen pizzas, vegetables, and boxes of meat. At first I didn't see anyone. Then I heard breathing. Slow, heavy breathing. I froze instantly. The sound echoed somewhere deeper inside the freezer. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. Just breathing. I took a few cautious steps forward, the freezing air burning my lungs. That's when I saw movement between 2 shelves near the back wall. A man slowly stepped into view. Tall, thin, bald. He wore a gray hoodie despite the temperature being well below freezing inside. What I noticed first were his hands, bright red from the cold. He just stood there staring at me, not speaking, not blinking. I said, "Sir, the store's closing." Nothing. He kept staring. Something about him made my stomach tighten immediately. Most shoplifters or homeless people acted nervous when caught. This guy looked calm. Too calm. Like he'd been waiting for me. I slowly backed toward the freezer door. "I'm gonna get my manager," I said. The moment I said that, the man suddenly stepped toward me. Fast. Then another step. I turned and hurried out of the freezer, nearly slipping on the wet concrete floor. The second I got outside, I shoved the freezer door shut and held it closed with both hands. A loud bang exploded against the other side. Then another. Boom! Boom! The metal door shook violently under my hands. I yelled for Denise to call the cops. The banging continued for several seconds before suddenly stopping. Complete silence. Denise came running into the back room, holding the store phone with wide, terrified eyes. "The police are coming," she whispered. I kept staring at the freezer door. Nothing moved. No sound. After what felt like forever, officers finally arrived. I explained everything while one officer slowly opened the freezer door. Nobody was inside. They searched every aisle, every shelf. Nothing. The only strange thing they found was a shopping cart shoved near the back wall. Inside it were packages of raw meat from the butcher section. Some had been ripped open, half eaten. One officer asked if we had cameras in the storage room. We did. But when the manager reviewed the footage the next morning, the recording from 11:32 p.m. to 11:48 p.m. was corrupted. Just static. I tried convincing myself the guy had somehow slipped out before police arrived. but something still felt wrong about the whole thing. 2 weeks later, I was working my final shift before quitting. I was cleaning near the employee lockers when Denise walked over holding her phone. Without saying anything, she showed me a screenshot from the front entrance security camera taken that night. The image showed me walking toward the back room after she called me over the intercom. But behind me, partially hidden beside the greeting card aisle, was the same bald man, watching me. The timestamp on the image made my stomach drop. 11:31 p.m., almost 10 minutes before Denise called me about someone being inside the freezer, which meant he'd already been in the store. Watching me. Long before anyone realized he was there. And the worst part? The automatic front doors in the image were still closed, meaning somehow nobody had seen him come inside at all. When I was 19, I worked overnight shifts at a 24-hour fast food restaurant outside Phoenix, Arizona. It sat right off the interstate, so the customers after midnight were always unpredictable. Truckers, drunk college kids, exhausted travelers, random people wandering in from nowhere. Most nights were boring, though, just cleaning counters, dropping fries, and trying not to fall asleep before sunrise. Usually, it was only me and the cook working overnight. His name was Raul. Raul had been there for years and acted like nothing scared him. He'd dealt with fights, robberies, drug addicts, screaming in the parking lot. Pretty much everything. That's why what happened that night stuck with me so badly. It was during monsoon season, sometime in late August. Around midnight, a huge storm rolled in. Rain hammered the building so hard it sounded like someone throwing handfuls of rocks at the windows. Thunder shook the walls every few minutes, and the parking lot outside looked almost flooded. By 1:30 a.m., we hadn't had a single customer in nearly an hour. Raul was in the kitchen scrubbing the grill, while I leaned against the front counter scrolling through my phone. Then the drive-thru headset beeped. I put it on automatically. "Welcome to Burger Spot. What can I get started for you tonight?" Silence. I waited a few seconds. Then I heard breathing. Slow. Wet breathing. At first I figured it was some teenager messing around. "Hello?" I asked. The breathing continued. Then a man quietly whispered, "He's still in there." I frowned. "What?" No answer. The line suddenly disconnected. I looked toward the drive-thru window expecting to see headlights. Nothing. The lane was empty. I checked the security monitor above the register that showed the drive-thru camera feed. Still empty. No car. No person. Nothing. I told Raul about it, but he laughed. "People get weird during storms," he said. I tried laughing too, but honestly the voice bothered me. There was something wrong with it. Not the words. The tone. Like the guy sounded genuinely afraid. About 10 minutes later, the headset beeped again. This time, I hesitated before answering. "Burger Spot, can I help you?" Breathing again. Closer now. Then the same voice whispered, "Don't look behind you." Every hair on my arm stood up. I slowly turned around anyway. Raul was still cleaning the grill. Nobody else. I pulled the headset off. "Okay, seriously, this isn't funny." Raul looked confused. "What are you talking about?" I explained the second message. That finally made him uneasy too. He walked over and checked the drive-thru monitor himself. Empty lane, rain pouring down. No customer, no headlights, nothing. Raul grabbed the heavy flashlight we kept under the counter. "I'm checking outside," he said. I told him not to. but he ignored me. I watched through the front windows as he stepped under the awning and shined the flashlight across the parking lot. The rain distorted everything beyond a few feet. Raoul walked toward the side of the building near the dumpsters. Then he suddenly froze. Even from inside, I could tell something scared him. A second later, he turned and sprinted back into the restaurant. He slammed the door shut behind him. "There's somebody out there," he said breathlessly. "Where?" "Behind the dumpster." "Did you see his face?" Raoul shook his head. "No." But he was standing there watching me. We locked the lobby doors immediately, even though technically they were supposed to stay unlocked all night. For the next 20 minutes, nothing happened. No customers, no movement outside, just thunder and rain. Eventually, I started convincing myself maybe we were overreacting. Then the headset beeped again. Raoul stared at me. Neither of us moved for a second. Finally, I slowly picked up the headset. The voice sounded different this time, closer, almost amused. "I told you he was still there." I whispered, "Who are you?" A long pause followed. Then, "The man in the raincoat." At that exact moment, Raoul looked toward the front windows. His face went completely pale. I turned around. A man was standing outside the locked lobby doors, perfectly still. Yellow raincoat, hood pulled low over his face. Water dripped from the sleeves onto the concrete. I couldn't see his eyes through the dark glass, but I knew he was staring directly at me. Then he slowly raised one hand and pointed. At me. The headset crackled again. "He sees you now." The voice began laughing softly. I ripped the headset off so fast it hit the counter. Raoul immediately grabbed the phone and called 911. The man outside still didn't move, didn't knock, didn't try the door. Just stood there, staring through the glass. Then suddenly, every light inside the restaurant shut off. Everything went black. The storm had killed the power. For about 3 seconds, we stood there in complete darkness. No sound except rain pounding outside. Then the emergency backup lights flickered on. The man was gone. The parking lot outside was completely empty. Police arrived within minutes and searched the area with flashlights. No footprints, no vehicle, nothing. One officer even checked the drainage ditch behind the building in case someone had hidden there. Still nothing. The rest of the shift was horrible. Every little sound made me jump. By sunrise, the storm finally cleared, and a repair technician came to inspect the restaurant after the power outage. Raoul casually mentioned the weird drive-thru calls. The technician frowned. "What calls?" "The headset," I said. "Someone kept talking through the speaker." The technician looked confused. Then he walked outside and opened the speaker box near the drive-thru menu. A minute later, he came back inside. "You sure about that?" "What do you mean?" He stared at us for a second before speaking. "This speaker hasn't worked in weeks." Neither of us said anything. "The wiring's completely fried," he continued. "There's no way anybody could have used it last night." I remember feeling cold all over. Raoul tried arguing with him, insisting we both heard the voice, but the technician just shrugged. Before leaving, he added one last thing. "Honestly, it's a good thing it wasn't working." "Why?" He looked out toward the parking lot. "Because the storm knocked out all the outdoor cameras around midnight, too." I frowned. So if somebody really was standing out there talking to you. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Because to this day, I still remember one detail I never told police. when the man in the yellow raincoat pointed at me through the glass. His sleeve slid back slightly, and his hand looked gray, bloated, like it had been sitting under water for a very long time. A few years ago, I worked private security for a gated community outside Atlanta. Most overnight shifts were painfully boring. You sat in a small office watching security cameras while occasionally driving through the neighborhood to make sure nobody was speeding or messing with mailboxes. The community mostly consisted of older, wealthy couples, so nothing ever really happened. At least that's what I thought. One Friday night around 3 a.m., I was halfway through a 12-hour shift when the office phone rang. I nearly jumped because calls that late were rare. I answered expecting a noise complaint or maybe someone locked out of their house. Instead, I heard an elderly woman whisper, "There's somebody in my house." I sat up immediately. "Ma'am, what's your address?" She gave me an address only a few streets away from the security office. Her voice shook so badly I could barely understand her. "I heard footsteps downstairs," she whispered. "I think someone came in through the back." I asked if she'd called the police. "Yes," she said, "but I can still hear him moving." I told her to lock herself inside a room until officers arrived. Then I grabbed my flashlight and headed there myself. Looking back, I should have waited for police. But at the time, I honestly thought it was probably a false alarm. Maybe a raccoon, maybe pipes creaking, maybe paranoia. The neighborhood was completely silent when I arrived. No lights on, no movement. The woman opened the front door before I could even knock. She looked around 70 years old and absolutely terrified. "I heard him downstairs," she whispered. "Then upstairs." I told her to stay behind me while I checked the house. The downstairs looked normal at first. The kitchen light was on. Nothing appeared broken or disturbed. No shattered windows. No forced entry. Still, the place felt wrong. Too quiet. I slowly moved through the living room, shining my flashlight across the furniture. That's when I heard a soft creaking sound upstairs. I stopped moving instantly. The woman grabbed my arm. "I heard that earlier," she whispered. I told her to stay near the staircase while I checked. As I stepped toward the stairs, I heard another sound behind me, a quiet shuffle, like someone stepping across carpet. I spun around and pointed the flashlight toward the living room. Nothing. But one of the curtains near the back window was swaying slightly, like somebody had brushed past it. My heart started pounding. I called out loudly, "Security! If someone's inside this house, police are on the way!" No response. Then suddenly the woman screamed upstairs. I nearly dropped the flashlight. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time and found her standing in the hallway pointing toward her bedroom. "The closet!" she cried. "Somebody shut the closet door!" I remembered clearly seeing that closet open earlier when we first walked upstairs. Now it was completely closed. I stepped toward it slowly. And then I heard movement inside. Very faint, like fabric rubbing together. The woman backed away, crying, while I reached for the handle. I yanked the door open. Empty. Just hanging clothes. No person. No movement. The woman started shaking uncontrollably. A few minutes later, police finally arrived. 2 officers searched the house while another stayed with the woman downstairs. They checked every room, every window, every closet. Nothing. One officer quietly suggested she may have imagined the noises, but another officer asked if the home had cameras. The woman nodded. She had a small indoor security system connected to her phone. We all gathered around while she pulled up the footage. At first, everything looked normal. The downstairs camera showed me entering the house and checking rooms. Then she switched to the upstairs hallway camera. The moment the footage started, every person in the room went silent. Because while I was downstairs searching the kitchen, someone had walked slowly across the hallway behind the woman. Tall, thin, wearing dark clothes. The figure moved calmly toward her bedroom. No rush, no panic, like they knew exactly where they were going. The person disappeared into the room. A few seconds later, the closet door slowly swung shut by itself. The officer paused the footage. You could barely make out the figure's face, but it definitely looked human. One of the officers immediately searched the house again after seeing the footage. Still nothing. No attic access, no crawl spaces, no open windows. Nothing. Eventually, the police left after telling the woman to stay with family for the night. I drove back to the security office around 5 a.m. feeling genuinely sick. I kept replaying the footage in my head. The way the figure moved bothered me more than anything. Most burglars panic when people are nearby. This person looked relaxed, comfortable, like they'd been inside that house before. Around sunrise, I finally started calming down. Then the office phone rang again. Same address, same woman. Crying. I answered immediately. "Ma'am, what happened?" Her voice was barely audible. "I think he came back." Police rushed over again. This time, officers searched the woods behind her backyard fence. About 50 yards into the trees, they found a small hidden campsite. Blankets, food wrappers, water bottles, and dozens of printed photographs of the woman's house. Some were taken during the day. Others were taken at night from the woods. Several were zoomed directly into her bedroom windows. One officer brought the photos back to the security office later that morning because they needed copies of our patrol logs. I remember flipping through them while feeling physically nauseous. Some pictures were clearly taken from inside the neighborhood for weeks, maybe months. Then I saw the final photo, and that was the one that truly terrified me. The image showed the upstairs hallway inside the woman's house, taken from only a few feet away from her bedroom door. The timestamp in the corner was from nearly 2 weeks earlier, which meant someone had already been inside that home long before that night. The police believed the intruder had probably been secretly entering through an old basement access point hidden behind storage shelves. They searched again later and found signs somebody had tampered with the latch from outside, but they never found the person responsible. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing useful. For a while, I convinced myself that was the end of it. Then about 3 weeks later, I was working another overnight shift alone. Around 2:30 a.m., I started reviewing random security footage from around the neighborhood while eating vending machine chips, mostly just trying to stay awake. One of the neighborhood cameras overlooked the main entrance gate. I noticed something strange almost immediately. A person standing near the trees beside the gate, just barely visible in the darkness. At first I thought it was a resident walking their dog, but then I realized they weren't moving. I zoomed in slightly. Tall, thin, dark clothes, standing perfectly still facing the security office. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I grabbed the patrol flashlight and stepped outside the office to look. The road near the gate was empty. Nobody there. I went back inside and checked the camera again. The figure was gone. I told myself I was being paranoid after what happened at the woman's house, but then I noticed something else. The timestamp on the footage wasn't live. The camera feed I'd been watching was from earlier that night, around 1:14 a.m., which meant whoever I saw near the gate had already been there over an hour before I noticed them. And suddenly, I remembered something that made my blood run cold. At 1:14 a.m., I had been outside doing my patrol rounds, which meant the security office had been completely empty, except for the monitors. Watching the footage again, I realized the figure near the gate wasn't facing the office. They were facing the camera, standing completely still, almost like they knew someone would eventually rewind the footage and see them there, waiting